installment of the DC3 Financial Wellness classes. My name is Darryl Mitchell. I'm a financial advisor for a firm called Distinct Financial Solutions based out of Denton, Texas. And I'm going to give a few minutes for other folks to get in here. So we will just hang out here for a second and wait for some more folks to come in. I'm just waiting for some more folks to come in here. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Hopefully everyone is doing okay today. No one has had to deal with COVID like me and my household. It's been a crazy couple of weeks for us, but God is good, and we're here. We're alive and we're well. So give a couple more minutes for some more folks to come in, and then we will get started. I guess what I can do while we're waiting on folks is talk about a little bit of my background. Again, my name is Darryl Mitchell. I'm a financial advisor for a wealth management firm based out of Denton, Texas. It's called Distinct Financial Solutions. Got tongue tied there. And I don't think I mentioned this last week, but part of the reason why I started in this business in the financial services industry was because I needed answers. And unfortunately, at the time, there was nowhere I could go where I didn't have to pay a couple $100s per hour to get the information that I needed. And at the time, you have to have for a lot of folks, you have to have a net worth over a certain amount to be able to even speak to someone. So I was running across some issues, wanted some more education, but couldn't find the right sources. And there's all kind of conflicting information all over the internet. So that was hard to come across. And then I actually found out that in learning about I come from a line of business owners and entrepreneurs, and my grandfather was a brilliant man, great businessman. Everyone loved him, and he would build businesses up just out of boredom. And he started one particular business and got it going really well. And he was building out about $50,000 or $60,000 a month in revenue. And this is back in the early 90s. So he was doing pretty well. That's close to $100,000, a bit over $100,000 in today's dollars. But anyway, he was making money hand over fist, doing really well. And he got diagnosed with, colon cancer and passed away. And my father had to take out a loan to be able to bury him. So that was really shocking for me to find out that there wasn't much that he had in the way of savings or life insurance. So that also catapulted me into a journey of figuring out how do we get things going the right way. And by the grace of God, been able to have some conversations with family members and things like that. We got everybody on the right track. So my history with money, and I always ask people this, what their history with money is. My history with money is I saw the ugly and dark side of entrepreneurship, and it didn't have much in the way of provision for our family in terms of while we were working and legacy that was left. So that motivated me to get into the industry. I've been in the industry almost 8 years now. I've been with Distinct Financial Solutions for going on almost 5 years. And I love what I do. I love serving people. I work with folks all the way down from building a budget and cash flowing. Work with business owners to help them work on the business and not just in the business. And we also help with retirement planning. Excuse me. We also help with retirement and income planning to help people build a solid structure for their for their financial freedom years. So anyway, it's 12:05, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, a couple of housekeeping items here. I can't see who all is in the class. I can't see your faces or anything, which I'm normally used to seeing. So that's going to be kind of weird for me. Also, I'm going to share my screen with you when I share some information, but I cannot see your questions while I'm sharing my screen. I encourage questions along the way as we're in the class. So I will periodically stop my screen share so that I can see if you have any questions. And if you have any detailed, specific questions that will require a bit more of a detailed answer, then I will forward those questions over to the Q&A that you will be provided with a Zoom link to go to the Q&A immediately following this session. We'll have Q&A for about 30 minutes, and I can answer your detailed questions there. But I do encourage questions along the way if you have some. So that being said, it's good to be here. This is the day the Lord has made. I'll rejoice and be glad in it. He's given me another day. My family and I have battled through COVID, and we're on the up and up, and everybody's doing well. And this is the second installment of DC3's financial class. And today we're going to be covering investing in insurance. Now, last week we covered budgeting and debt management. This week we'll cover investing in life insurance, and then next week we'll cover financial freedom planning, retirement planning, and things like that. And the goal for this 3-week period is for us to understand what it means to have a strong, solid financial plan through every aspect of our financial journey, not just in investing, not just in insurance, not just in budgeting, but we see how all those things to come together and work together for you to create a solid plan to increase your chances of success in reaching and or maintaining financial freedom. So the other housekeeping I meant to say is that I get excited about sharing what we're talking about today, and we've got a lot to cover, so we might not get to it all. Again, there'll be extra time with the Q&A. I have an agenda beside me here that I'm going to periodically look down towards, because sometimes I can get a little excited and get a little long-winded and get away from the agenda. So I want to make sure I stick to my agenda and cover the points that I want to cover. So you may see me periodically look down to make sure I keep myself on track. That's just a accountability system I have for myself. So good evening, Ms. Tasha. I see you there. Glad that you're with us. We're going to be covering investing basics, portfolio management, and risk management today, along with insurance. So again, I mentioned last week that we talked about budgeting and debt management and wealth management and the difference between those things. Today we'll cover insurance and investing, and we're going to start with insurance. So I'll share my screen here with you right now. And again, while my screen is up, I can't see any questions that you may have. So I will periodically stop my screen share so that I can see any questions that you may have, and I'll pull my screen back up. So let me know if you can see my screen. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. All right, now last week, when we talked about budgeting and debt management, when we began the class, I asked you if you were presented with two paths towards your financial success and your financial freedom, and one path gave you a 47% chance of success, and the other path gave you a 99% chance of success, which of those paths would you choose? Now, I couldn't see everybody's responses there, but I'm pretty sure most of everyone chose the 99%, the 99% path to get to your financial success and your financial freedom. And remember, we defined financial success as using money to do what you are called and purposed to do. Success is not just about having a lot of money. We want to do something with that money, and God has called us to do specific things in our lives to help people, to help family, to whatever your mission is, to accomplish that mission. That is what we define as success. And so my goal for our clients at DFS, and my goal on Hope and Prayer for you, is that we would help you build a structure and a plan to increase your chances more towards the 99% of you building a successful financial plan. Now, use 99% because nothing in life is absolutely guaranteed except for death. So, anything can happen. But the goal, again, is to build a plan that will increase your chances of success. And so I want to spend time today talking about those things and those tools that will increase your chances for success. There is a lot of noise out there. There are a lot of things out there that will catch your attention, but they do not necessarily increase your probability for reaching success. So we're going to spend time on those things today. Okay. So we'll start with insurance. We'll start with life insurance. And here's what I want you guys to understand about life insurance. There's two major types of insurance. There's what we call term insurance and what we call permanent insurance. And we'll say PERM for short, term and PERM. Okay. Out of all the life insurances out there, there's they fall into two main categories, permanent and term. Okay. Now there are different types of term insurance. You have level term. This is what everybody's used to, where you've got 10, 20, 30-year periods that you're covered for life insurance. And the life insurance company basically takes the amount of time that you're going to be insured for, and they divide up the cost evenly amongst those years. And that's why it's called level term, because the price stays the same. And then you also have group life through your employer. That is a term policy, which means it's temporary, which you do not own. That is owned by your employer, unless you have some special arrangement. Typically, when you leave that employer, that policy is not going to go with you. You can't take that policy with you. It is a temporary group life policy. Okay. Then the other type of insurance is called annual renewable term, or ART for short. And the difference between annual renewable term and level term is that I mentioned with level term, it takes the cost of insuring you over the certain number of years and divides that cost up evenly amongst those years. With annual renewable term, it charges you year by year. So it starts off a lot cheaper than level term insurance, but it can get to be really expensive after a particular amount of time. So there's a certain way you have to use a strategy for an annual renewable term. You also have what's called term to a particular age. And that's basically the same as level term insurance, except for once you get to a certain age, as you get closer to that age, the price can fluctuate a little bit on you there. So those are the basic types of term life insurance, the basic types of permanent insurance. And here's the other thing about term insurance. Term insurance usually starts off a lot cheaper, okay, or they usually remain a lot cheaper than permanent insurance. Permanent insurance is usually a lot more expensive, okay, but it is designed to last and be there when you die. Term insurance policies are not designed to be there when you die. Term insurance policies are on an if I die basis. Permanent insurance policies are on a when I die basis. So as long as you structure your permanent insurance policy correctly, that death benefit will be there when you pass away. With term insurance, something like 2 to 3% of term insurance policies actually ever pay out a death benefit. So they are not designed to be there when you die. We'll talk about that here in just a second. So the different types of permanent insurance are: you can have whole life insurance. That is a type of permanent insurance. I get the comparison a lot of, hey, Darryl, should I buy term or should I buy whole? Term is a category of insurance. Whole life is a type of insurance. It's just one type of permanent insurance. So you've got whole life insurance. You've got what's called indexed universal life insurance, which is IUL for short. You've got what's called variable life insurance. You've got another type of insurance called signature guarantee universal life insurance, right? And the main difference between these permanent types of insurance is the way that you pay your premiums and the way that they credit the policies as you hold the policy. Okay, so the main difference, again, term insurance is temporary, not designed to last. Permanent insurance is designed to last, but it tends to be a lot more expensive. Okay, so let's say you've got term insurance and you've got it for 30 years, right? By the time you turn 30, or not 30, but not the time you turn 31, but in your first year of the policy, those premiums are going to start to skyrocket on you. Okay, this is what happened to my grandfather. Is that he had a term insurance policy, and for whatever reason, he decided not to pay the premiums and let the policy lapse. So this is what happens to a lot of people. So when you get term insurance, the goal for you should be to grow your own assets over that amount of time that you have term insurance. Okay. So by the time your policy expires, you will have had and built up enough of your own assets to be able to self-insure, meaning that you may not necessarily need life insurance by the time that term policy expires. Okay, the goal for you. So you may have heard the phrase buy term and invest the difference. The only way that strategy works is if you actually invest the difference, right? The difference means buy term and invest the difference, as opposed to if you would have bought permanent insurance and use more of your dollars. So if you're going to buy term insurance, that's okay. I'm not more of an advocate for either one or the other. I'm okay with term or permanent. But if you're going to buy term insurance, it is crucial that you put yourself on a plan to be able to self-insure by the time that term policy expires. And I can tell you, out of most of the people I've worked with, most people do end up wanting some sort of insurance by the time they get older. Okay, so it's important for you to build up your own savings there. Okay. There was another point about term insurance I was going to bring up. Oh, here's the importance about this, and I mentioned this last week when I showed you guys a PowerPoint of a house that had a foundation, right? And I mentioned to you that if you saw me building my house and I was building the roof first before I put down the foundation, you might say, I'm not a pro at building houses, but I don't think you're supposed to start with the roof before you start with the foundation, right? Well, the two outermost pieces of the foundation that set up for a house was savings, which we covered last week, and budgeting. And then risk was that other piece that was on the outside of the foundation. Risk involves life insurance. And the reason why I'm talking about life insurance today is because it makes no sense for us to go on a plan to build wealth, and we've got all these things going on, and you pass away in the midst of you building wealth, and you didn't get a chance to set aside what you want to set aside for your family. If legacy is important to you, we have to start with life insurance before we go to the more advanced things. That's what our financial plan is set on the foundation of. Life insurance is important, and it is a huge life insurance epidemic in our communities, and really across all of America. We have an issue with life insurance. Out of all the attendees in this class, and probably the church and the whole city, I can point to 7 out of every 10 people that do not have an appropriate amount of life insurance, right? 7 out of every 10 families do not have an appropriate amount. As a matter of fact, if you still have children in the household that are economically dependent upon you, there is an average gap of $250,000 in life insurance for your family. Out of all the hundreds of conversations I've had with families, I've sat down with the one family that had an appropriate amount of life insurance when we started our plan. So that is usually the part of your financial plan that I'll start with to make sure that you are appropriately insured before we get to the rest of addressing the rest of your financial plan. I want to stop my screen share here for a second to see if we have any questions. See if I have any questions along the way. Are there any questions? Anyone have any questions up until this point? Miss Mary, I'm glad you can see the screen share. Jennifer, thanks for confirming that you can see the screen share. Any questions up until this point? Okay, no questions. We'll pull back up the screen share. Okay, so a quick recap. 2 main types of insurance: term insurance, which is more affordable, it's less expensive, it is temporary, designed to last only a specific amount of time. And then you have permanent insurance, which is designed to last. Term insurance is on an if I die basis. Permanent insurance is on a when I die basis. And with permanent insurance, the way that permanent insurance works is that you pay a premium each month to maintain a death benefit in your policy. All right, so that means when you die, your relatives are going to get a pot of cash for your death benefit. Your premiums can also pay into a living benefit, which gives you access to cash while you're still alive. Okay, the premium goes to both of these things. Now, if you structure this correctly, your living benefit can be invested and start to grow, and this pot will get bigger. Okay, once it gets big enough, the cash in your living benefit pot can go to pay for you, and you don't have to pay any more premiums for the rest of the policy. Okay, That is the correct way that you structure permanent insurance, which is why it's usually more expensive than term insurance, because you want to max fund the policy in the beginning stages of the life of the policy so that the cash pot, your living death benefit, can grow large enough to pay on your death benefit so you don't have to pay premiums anymore. And by the time you die, or while you're still living, you can gain access to this cash and do whatever you want to do with it. Some people use these living benefit policies to pay for their kids' college. Some people use it to supplement their retirement. I have clients that have saved for living benefit, and they have income scheduled to take out over a 20-year, 30-year time frame, right? So you can build those living benefits to use them for whatever you want. And when you pass away, you still have a death benefit left over for your relatives. So you get to sort of kind of double dip there a little bit in regards to the permanent insurance. That's the main way the permanent insurance works, regardless of how the funding and structure is set up. That's the main concept of permanent insurance. So if someone's presenting permanent insurance to you and they are pitching it because it's affordable, then you want to be careful, because these products are not designed to necessarily be affordable. Okay, they're not, or when I say affordable, they're not necessarily designed to be cheap. Okay, so you want to make sure you're setting up and structuring your policies so that you can build a living benefit well enough to be able to either build your cash pot up so that you can use it while you're alive, or do both, where you can build your living benefit up to use cash and it can pay on your policy for you without you having to continue to pay the policy. I have some people that have paid on the permanent policies for about 15 years, and after the 15 years, they never put another dime into the policy. Some have done it as quickly as 10 years. Some have done it as quickly as 7 years, and they never put another dime into their life insurance policy. Okay, so you want to make sure you structure those things correctly and talk with a professional. And if you'd like to have the discussion, then I'll make sure I put my my information here so you can see it at the end of the presentation today, or you can head on over to the Q&A and we can discuss it there. But it's really important that you structure those policies correctly. Okay, so quick recap: term insurance, temporary, not designed to last. You want to build your own assets to self-insure. Permanent insurance is designed to last. It can typically be a bit more expensive, but you want to fund it the right way to make sure your insurance is there whenever you pass away, to be there for your relatives. Okay. Look down at my my pad here because I want to make sure I stay on agenda. Any questions that we have up until this point about permanent insurance? I'm going to stop my screen share really quick so that I can see your questions. Okay, Dame, you said I just answered one of your questions. Jennifer says, I'm not married, no dependents. Real completely paid. And I chosen it. Okay, does it make sense to get permanent insurance? Jennifer is asking. I normally recommend that your employer's insurance be the icing on the cake. Don't let that your employer's insurance be your main insurance strategy. There have been situations where people have gotten insurance through their employer, they've gotten sick or something has happened and they've become uninsurable. So when they left that employer, they couldn't get insurance anywhere. Their insurance was always tied to their employer. And you already have enough of your risk tied into your employer. You already have your paycheck, your health insurance, your 401k. There's no need for you to tie in an extra risk of life insurance to your employer unnecessarily. Okay. Hopefully that answered your question, Jennifer. If you have a question beyond that, then let me know, or you can head over to the Q&A and we'll talk a little bit more about it there. Okay. I'll pull back up the screen share. Okay, Damon has a question. What's your question, Damon? I'm not sure I can see your question there, Damon. I'll pull back up my screen share. Go ahead and type it, and I'll stop my screen share here and see what your question is here in just a second. Okay, going to pull back up my screen share. Okay, guys. So let's talk about the investing portion of our financial plan here. Okay. And now remember, I asked you in the beginning if you had two paths, 47% chance and a 99% chance, which of those paths would you take in regards to your financial plan? So with investing, there's a certain type of way you need to approach your investing journey to ensure that you build the playing field, tip the playing field in your favor, right? So if I had to ask you guys this question, actually I'm gonna ask you guys this question. The market has returned an average of around 14 or so percent over the last 25, 30 years. What do you think the average investor's return has been over that same amount of time? It has been in the 2 to 4% range. 2 to 4%. Now, why is there such a big difference between what the market returns and what the average investor is returning? And the major reason for that gap here, is behavior. It's investor behavior. There's a quote that I can't remember who said it, but he said, investors does not get investment returns, they get investor returns, which is much, much worse, right? There is a lot of noise that goes on in the world about what you should be doing, what high stock you should be picking, what investment you should be picking. But really, the thing that's going to make the biggest difference in your financial success as an investor is your behavior and your structure and your plan, right? Your goal your objective as an investor, and this is going to sound crazy when I say this, your objective as an investor is not to make as much money as you possibly can in the market. And are you thinking, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, what? Wait a minute, whoa. Yes, your objective as an investor is not to make as much money as you can in the market. Your objective as an investor is to hit your goal. It is to hit your goal. And this is the way you shape this, okay? When you're wanting to start investing, you always start with your goal first. What do I want to use the money for? Okay? What do I want to use the money for? The next thing you start with is your time frame. And this all addresses structure and behavior, right? What I want to use the money for, how long do I have until I'm going to need the money? Okay? The next thing that you start with is your risk exposure. How much risk am I comfortable with taking while I'm investing? Because investing involves risk and potential loss to principal. And this is a really important part of your investing journey, because I would say a strong 95%, of investors that I come across, they are always taking on more risk than what's necessary. And what happens is when the market corrects itself and they get caught in the game of volatility, they see the red hit their accounts, they panic and they pull their money out, or they make some adjustments unnecessarily to their portfolio that will lock in a permanent loss for themselves. The essence of investing is the management of risk. It's not the management of returns. And I'll expound on that here in a little bit. Okay. So you start with your goal, your time frame, your risk exposure, and then you move to the type of investment that you want to use. Okay. So it's goal, time frame. Goal is what I want to use the money for. Time frame is when am I going to need the money. Risk exposure is how much risk am I comfortable with taking in a given amount of time. And then you move to the type of investment that you want to use. You let your goals dictate the type of investment that you go on. Now, out of all these things, goal, time frame, risk exposure, and investment returns, market returns, which of those things can you control the least? Out of goal, time frame, risk exposure, and investment, which of those things can you control the least? The investment market returns is what you actually control the least. But what is the thing that most people focus on the most? They focus on the market investment returns. Okay. So the thing that we control the least is the thing that we give the most attention to, right? That is not a good structure and plan for your financial plan, which is the reason why I pointed this out. You start with your goal. What do I want to use the money for? Time frame. How long do I have before I need the money? Risk exposure. How comfortable am I with taking risks? And then you move to the investment type. Does that make sense? All right. Now, once you know what your goal is and your time frame is, then you want to implement a system for your investment process. And that system has to do with what's called portfolio management. Portfolio management, okay? And here's the most important part of your portfolio is the amount of money you have to invest overall, okay? And here's the most important part of your investing journey along with your risk exposure. It's a term called asset allocation. And remember, we're addressing this now, and I meant to say this earlier. When we're addressing systems and structures to increase your probability and your chances to be successful with your financial plan, that does not involve me telling you what stock you should pick. That doesn't involve me telling you the next hot thing, right? Because people often ask me, they'll say, "Hey, Darryl, what is the next hot stock? What is the next thing I should invest in? You know, what is the market going to do tomorrow?" And if they ask me that, what is the market going to do tomorrow? You know what I tell them? I don't know. If they say, what is the market going to do next month? Where's the market going to be at next month? You know what I tell them? I don't know. If they say, "Hey, Darryl, where's the market going to be at next year?" And I may be able to give some context based on where we are in history and what the history of the economy has done. But overall, I cannot tell you where exactly the market is going to be at next year. And that may shock you and say, "Well, Darryl, you're supposed to be a financial advisor. You're supposed to be, you're supposed to know." Well, my goal as a financial advisor for my investors is not to be able to predict where the market is going to go. I don't have a magic crystal ball. The Lord has not given me insight as to where the market is going to be. My goal as an advisor for my investors, and my goal, my hope and prayer for you guys, is that you build a successful financial plan that's going to be successful regardless of what the market is doing, right? You don't want to be building your structure and your financial plan based on one or two singular stocks or one or two shifts in the market along the way, because statistically and historically, that does not work in your favor. That does not move you. That does not move the needle towards getting towards a higher percentage of successful investing and financial planning. Structure your asset allocation. This has to do with the amount of stocks versus bonds that you have in your portfolio, or fixed income or other assets, right? You can have a 70-30 split. You can have a 60-40 split. A 60-40 split is typically what is known as like the all-weather tire or the all-seasons type of portfolio as you're investing, right? But asset allocation accounts for about 85 to 90% of your portfolio return. Before you even get to what stock I'm going to pick, or what mutual fund or what ETF I'm going to pick, just the mix and the ratio between stocks and bonds heavily influences what your return is going to be over the long term. All right. So you want to identify how, and your mix of asset allocation is directly correlated to how much risk you're going to assume to be able to gather a return in your portfolio. Now, exposing yourself to more risks does give you the possibility of making more return, but more risk does not guarantee more return. Okay, so it's about making sure you pick an appropriate asset allocation that you're comfortable with over time, that you can stay consistent with in doing that. Okay, so asset allocation is a huge part of that. The other part of this is what's called rebalancing. Rebalancing your portfolio. Okay, what that means is, let's say I have a 60-40 split between stocks and bonds. Okay, and once that portfolio has started and is growing, well, stocks typically over the long term are going to grow a little bit faster than bonds will. Excuse me, guys, for coughing. I'm still getting over COVID, so I apologize for the coughing. But let's say your portfolio has a mix of 60% stocks and 40% bonds. Okay, well, over time, this percentage may end up adjusting based on what your portfolio is doing. So now you may have a 68% stocks and 32% bonds. Well, this is what fulfills the number one rule when it comes to investing. And what's the number one rule, right? Buy low, sell high. Okay, so if you've got a portfolio that's moved from 60-40 to 68-32, Well, in keeping with your asset allocation, you want to be around 60. I'm not saying everyone should be 60/40, but if you're, and for the sake of this example, if you have a portfolio and you want to stay around the 60-40% split, then now you've got to go and take that extra 8% and you've got to sell off some things to get you back down to 60% stock exposure, right? And you've got to buy some things to get you back up to the 40% bonds or fixed income exposure. And that might feel a little weird because you're going to see investments doing well and making money. And it's like, why would I sell those? Well, again, the risk exposure and the asset allocation is what's going to make the biggest difference in your investing journey. So whatever you want your stock bond split to be, you've got to go in and occasionally rebalance to make sure you stay on track with that risk exposure. And what happens is most people don't pay attention. Their portfolios end up going to 80-20 splits between stocks and bonds, or 90-10. And then when the market corrects itself, it has this huge pullback on their portfolio. And they weren't aware, and their risk exposure is way out of whack, and they see all that red hit their accounts, and even though they're going to make up that money over time, it still spooks them. And they say, oh, I got to make some adjustments. I got to go in and do things. And they usually fall into a trap of selling the wrong things at the wrong time. So you want to build your asset allocation from the beginning, and then you want to set yourself a rebalancing schedule at least maybe one time a year. You don't want to go in and rebalance every other week, right? I mean, you're gonna end up creating more fees for yourself and things like that. I want to stop the screen share for a second to see if we have any questions. Okay. Damon says you'll go to the Q&A. Okay, I'll see you there, buddy. Any other questions up until this point? No questions. Okay, we'll keep going. All right, so we're talking about a system of portfolio management. Notice we still haven't mentioned any specific stock or anything like that. Your system is what's most important. So asset allocation, decide how much of a stock versus bond split that you want. That's going to be related to how much risk exposure you're comfortable with. Once you have that asset allocation split, 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, whatever you want it to be, then you've got to set yourself a rebalancing schedule to be able to go in and make some adjustments to your portfolio periodically. Most people do it on an annual basis. Some people do it on a year and a half. Some people do it on a 6-month basis. Here's the other important part of this. We're talking about asset allocation and rebalancing and things like that. You want to make sure you know and understand what type of investor that you want to be. Okay. There's a passive style of investing, which usually involves a lot of index investing and things like that. And then there's an active side of investing, which means that this is where the asset allocation, where you're going in and doing those things, yourself. Asset allocation and rebalancing. And there's another part of this active management that goes in here. You can either actively manage it yourself, or you can hire and outsource someone to do that. That's what my clients hire me for. And there's nothing wrong with hiring someone to do your active management, because unless you take a natural interest in reading K1s and financial statements and balance sheets and cash flow statements and all those things, unless you have a natural interest in going in and digging in and seeing what companies are doing or what mutual funds are doing, right, then you don't want to try to get into all this if you're not going to keep up with it yourself. Okay. That's the most important thing for an investor. You want to decide whether you want to be passive or active, and then decide whether or not you want to do the managing of yourself or you want to hire someone to do it. I'll tell you the thing about passive investing with index investing is I will compare index investing to active investing almost like the comparison of you having your own car to drive will be active investing, and you taking the bus would be passive investing. And there's nothing wrong with taking the bus, right? You're just most indexes are what they call market value weighted. And that means that the bigger a company is, the more space in the index it takes up, which means that it usually creates higher swings. So you're going with whatever direction the market is going to take you. So you've got to make sure you're okay with that, and that you set a certain portion of your portfolio to be okay with that. Okay. I'll give you guys a story. When I first got my licenses through a major brokerage firm I used to work for, I was a stockbroker when I first started, and people would call in and place trades, and I would take the trades for them. And it was interesting to me that I used to think that stock picking was all the rage and that's how people became successful. But when I started to learn about the systems and how portfolio management actually works, I could tell which investors were doing it versus which ones weren't. And the reason I could tell was because I would always have these regulars call in and they would ask what the prices of particular mutual funds or stock prices was. And then the call would go just like this. They would call in, they would say, yeah, what's the price of so-and-so? Okay, what's the price of so-and-so? Okay, what's the price of so-and-so? Okay, click, be done. The other caller will call in and say, what's the price of it? What's the price of it? Are you going to get the trade? It's almost 3 o'clock. Are you going to get the trade? They were so nervous thinking that something was going to happen. They were going to miss out on the next hot thing. Now, which one of those you think had a system in the process and which one didn't? All right. You don't want to be going along your investing journey, keeping yourself up at night, having nightmares about what your portfolio is going to do. That's not how investing works. Successful investing is often systematized and often really completely honest, it's kind of boring, right? You plug in your system, and as you put more money into your system, the same way that we did with last week was showing you how to plug money into your system with your budget and your financial map and your balance sheet, is the same way that you implement your system for investing. Okay, so here's the other thing I want to point out is investing is more about efficiency. Okay, so when you're building your portfolio, and here's how I like to build my portfolios, and I'll show you guys this actually right now. Here's a tool that I like to use for our clients, and it's called Riskalyze. And so we help our clients quantify the amount of risk that they're taking in their portfolio. And we quantify it over a 6-month time frame. And we show them, hey, based on how your portfolio is built, it can move either up or down in this particular fashion over a 6-month time frame. And goodness gracious, look at this. My screen doesn't want to work when I put it up for you guys. I've been doing it all morning. Okay, here we go. So I will have my clients fill out a risk score assessment, and it's on a scale of 1 to 100. So you can see here in this sample profile of mine, my risk score came back at a 55. Okay. Now, what usually happens when I talk with people is I will take their portfolio, I will review and look over what they're doing, and usually what happens is the portfolio that they're invested in comes back way higher than what they say their risk exposure, or what they're comfortable with for their risk exposure. So in this case, this is what happens. This kind of has $100,000. It's invested in the portfolio, and the portfolio risk score is a 72. Okay, that means that over the next 6 months, the likelihood of this portfolio moving up or down is at a 15, almost 16% downside and 25% upside. Now, this comes in at a higher score than what this profile says that they're comfortable with. So typically what I spend my time doing is going in and building proposals that will put their investment portfolio in a range that they're more comfortable with. That's the first thing, because if you're not comfortable with your risk exposure, it makes it really hard for you to be consistent over the life of your investing journey. Okay. The other thing is we make sure that their asset allocation is appropriately set up so that their chance for return, I usually like to build it in about twice the amount of potential reward as the downside here. So this downside is 10.5%, and this is right at 19.5, almost 20%. The reason why this is important for you as an investor is because when the market takes a downturn and then it goes through a correction, if you start with $1,000, actually, let me go back to my screen here. If you start with $1,000, or let's say $100,000, and the market takes a dip about 50%, which is what happened in the mortgage crisis for a lot of people back in the 07, 09 years, then your portfolio has just went from 100,000 to 50,000, right? Some people woke up and saw their $100,000 portfolio go down to $50,000. Now, if the market gains again 50%, right, then your $50,000 doesn't return back to $100,000. Your $50,000 returns now to $75,000. Okay, and what happens with a lot of people? What happens with a lot of people is that when the mortgage crisis happened in the 07 to 09 range, on average, it took people about 5 years to recover the money that they lost. 5 years on average. Okay. And again, that's because when the market takes a correction, it's going to take more of your portfolio's work to get back to where you were. So when you can position your portfolio, let me log back into this so you guys can see this. When you position your portfolio to where your upside potential is twice as much as your downside, right? And this has to do with your asset allocation mix. And I'll get to why that's important here in a second. But when you have the appropriate mix, then your portfolio doesn't have to suffer as much as someone else's who may be a bit more aggressive in their portfolio. This is why I say more aggression or more risk exposure doesn't always equate to more return over the long term. All right. So if your portfolio doesn't take as deep of a dive, it doesn't take as long for it to have to recover. All right. So that's the reason why it's important to make sure you have the correct asset allocation mix on there. Okay. The other portion of this I want to talk through is I want you guys to think about what it means to, when I say risk, really what I mean is volatility. Okay. Risk in my world, in the financial world, is defined as anything that will prevent you from having the amount of money they have when you need to have it. That is risk. Risk is defined as anything that will prevent you from having the amount of money that you need to have when you need to have it. Volatility has to do specifically with the ups and downs of the market. Okay. Risk is not the same as volatility. Risk has to do with not having enough life insurance. Risk has to do with not knowing your discretionary income and your budget. Risk has to do with not having an estate plan or legacy plan for you to pass on. Risk has to do with the amount of taxes you pay and how much it eats into your return over the long term. Volatility is specifically has to deal with the ups and downs of the market. Okay. And here's how I want you to think about this. Let's say you go out and buy a new car. Right. And you're pulling off from the dealership and you got your car, you're rock and roll, and you hop on the freeway and you gunning, you're heading home, you're feeling good, sunroof's up, sun is shining, you got your favorite music playing, everybody's, you're feeling real good. Now you're coming toward the exit where you got to exit off the freeway and you've got to go home. And you exit the freeway, you're coming towards the light and you notice you have 2 gas pedals and no brake pedal. Now imagine your feeling once you go to press that brake pedal and the car speeds up. I would be terrified knowing I'm heading right into this intersection and I have no brake pedal. Okay. That's how I want you to think about investing. There's a reason why you have a gas pedal, a brake pedal, and a steering wheel. Okay. And it's because not all portions of your portfolio should be designed to always step on the gas. Right. Not all portions of your portfolio should be designed for you to press on the brake and be safe, because you've got to take some risk to get some return. You want a combination of all three. You want a gas pedal in your portfolio, you want a brake pedal in your portfolio, and you want a steering wheel in your portfolio, meaning that when the economy's tanking, it's going down, you want to be able to tactically manage your portfolio and apply the brake so that you hedge some of the losses that you'll have to sustain temporarily. When the market is going on a run, you want a portion of your portfolio where you can step on the gas and run with the market, right? And when the when the market is a bit tumultuous and is back and forth and up and down, then you want to be able to effectively navigate those lanes of the market without compromising your time in the market and investing journey, right? So you want to be able to, that's my philosophy for investing is whenever the market is on a run and going up, man, I apply that gas pedal and we're getting after it and get as much as we can, right? As much as we can to get towards our goal. When the economy is relatively flat or tumultuous, then we're applying the steering wheel. And that means you maybe take on some investments that are not meant to knock it out of the park. They're just meant to get you just over and above what the market is doing. If the market is tanking and going on a downward spiral, then you're applying that brake pedal, right? Maybe you move more of your exposure in your portfolio to more bonds or fixed income or other types of assets that whose sole goal is meant to shield and hedge some of the risk that you're taking on. Right? You don't necessarily have to have all of your portfolio at the edge of the market in terms of taking risks for you to be successful as an investor. Because remember, your goal your objective as an investor is not just to make a ton of money. Your objective as an investor is to hit your goal, right? So you want to be able to effectively steer and navigate what the economy is doing in your system, in your asset allocation, and in your rebalancing methods to be able to effectively navigate the market. Okay. And here's another example I'll give you. You want to think of volatility in the market as a mighty rushing river going down the mountain, right? And let's say you've got water in the river going down the mountain, and there are tumultuous parts of the river, and there are more calm parts of the river. And your objective is, once you get to the bottom of that mountain, is to collect as much water as you can, because you got to let that water last for a certain number of years, say 30 years, right? And this is the first time I'm doing this illustration, but I like it, so I want you guys to see it. Now you're at the top of the mountain, and you've got a boat that you're going to go down the river on. And your objective is to collect as much water as you can. What usually happens with investors is that the tumultuous parts of the river is where all the exciting stuff happens, right? It's where all the the Bitcoin and the whatever else is the hot rave at the time. A lot of times investors will wait to the most tumultuous part of the river to collect as much water as possible. And then they crash their boats, or they get too much water in their boat and it sinks, right? Your goal as an investor is not to wait until you get to the most tumultuous part of the river. It's to know where to dip your pot in the river to get water to collect along the way. And you can't get too much water because it'll make your boat sink, right? And you can't have too little water, because you've got to make sure your water lasts for your financial freedom journey of however long that's going to be. Another thing that investors tend to do, is they'll have a boat, and as they're going down the river, right, they're getting down there, they may take more water out of their boat because they're scared of what the river is doing. They're scared they may sink, or they don't have a structure set up. They don't know what their financial map is. An emergency happens, they don't have an emergency fund cash. They've got to use that water while they're in the boat, because they don't have enough to water to sustain themselves while they go down the river. So then they wait till they get all the way down here, and they try to collect as much water as possible because they know they're fixing to hit land. And guess what usually happens? This is another tumultuous part of the river, right? And usually tumultuous and dangerous parts of the rivers don't occur always back to back. There's usually a pretty calm time. There's usually a correction on average in the markets. About every 7 out of every 10 years are up markets, and 3 out of those 10 years are usually down markets, just on average, right? So they wait to get all the way down towards the end of their journey, and they say, I got to collect as much water as possible so that I can get to where I need to go to make sure I have enough water. Well, that ends up being a tumultuous part of the river, and then they end up crashing their boat. So and notice, it doesn't matter how much water you have in your boat while you're doing these things. The most important thing is that you know where to dip in the water. You know how much water to carry as you're going down that journey, so that you can make it last as long as possible. That's a structural and a framework type of issue for you as an investor. It's not about timing the market. And I know that there are tons of classes out there that have all the rave in terms of options and other types of derivatives and things like that. And it's not that it's impossible for you to be successful doing those things. They just don't move you to the higher probability of success. Remember, we talked about the 47% versus 99%. You want to be doing things that's going to move you here. And it's not that you can't participate in some of those things that get all the rave. You just don't want to abandon the things that are proven and time tested while doing so. Okay. I haven't stopped the screen share in a while to look for questions. So I'm going to stop that and see if we've got any questions here. Damien says, with that said, doesn't passive investment you have to have a certain amount of money? There's no certain amount of money you have to have for a passive investment, especially with index investing. Index investing is usually a lot cheaper and doesn't cost you as much, but there's a trade-off to that, right? You're going to be carried with the whims and the weights of the market. So you've got to mix indexes up a certain way to get the outcome that you want, which ends up just becoming active investing. Any other questions? No other questions at the moment, so I'll go back to my screen share. Okay. Here's another important portion that I want you guys to realize. You've got to give your money the right kind of job whenever you're investing. And what I mean by that is just how I mentioned that investors will tend to wait a little bit late to start investing and making their savings a priority. You want to give your money the right kind of job, okay? You don't want to. What if you started on a new job and your boss came in and said, "Hey, I got these files I want you to organize for us, and I want you to have this done in about a couple hours." And he takes you to a room, opens the door, cuts the light on, and the whole room is full of file folders. I mean, from the floor to the ceiling. The first thing you're probably going to be thinking is, I can't do this in a couple hours, right? You've got to give yourself the right amount of time, and you've got to have the right person for the job to be able to do that. That's the same thing you want to do with your money. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're forcing your portfolio to perform in a way that historically is not accurate for you to perform. You want to make sure you give yourself enough time, you understand what your risk exposure is, and give your money enough time to work so that they can work successfully for you. And here's the thing about investing is that, here's the other thing I want to cover with you guys. 94% of trading days usually end up in a complete wash. All right, that means they go up and down by about the same amounts. We have about 252 trading days in a year. 236 of those end up becoming a complete wash. That means that there is just a few more days, about a 2-week difference. The amount of days results in about a 2-week difference. And just a few more days are good days, which means the market is going to be up for that year. And just a few more days are down years, which makes the market be down for that particular year. And it's not like that 2-week period is consecutive. That 2-week time frame, that 14 to 15 days, is scattered all throughout the year, right? So timing the market doesn't work for you, which is another reason why you want to have your system implemented the correct way, so that you're not having to worry about what the market's doing on a day-to-day basis. Good investors, long-term oriented investors, are not concerned with what the market is doing day in and day out like that, right? You shouldn't have to look at the market every single day like that to be able to successfully be invested over the long term. And because the stock market works in your favor throughout history. So let's say you mark it as daily, quarterly, yearly, 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. The idea of a loss versus a gain, if you look at your portfolio every single day, it's going to feel like you're losing almost 50% of the time. That's a terrible feeling when you're trying to invest for your future. Okay. Quarterly, let's see here. Quarterly, it's usually about a 70-30 split in terms of gain-loss ratio. All right. So if you look at the quarterly, it's going to look like you're winning probably 70% of the time. On an annual basis, it's pretty close to the same thing, about 70-30, 70-20 kind of gain-loss ratio. All right. Now, when you move out to 5 years, okay, the difference is drastic. Now your gain-loss ratio is about an 85 to 15% chance in terms of, and this is when you follow your system and you are rebalancing and you have an asset allocation approach. When you get out to 10 years, that goes to about 95 to 5% ratio in terms of your ability to perform over a 10-year period. When you move out to 20 years, it gets even higher. It goes to about a 99% chance that you're investing, you have your system in place over a 20-year time frame. And this is the difference between speculating and investing, right? This is the difference between that, because investing increases your chance for success over the long term. Speculating decreases your chance for success over the long term. when you give yourself enough time to invest over the long term, you're going to increase your chances for success. Time works in your favor, which is why you have to start sooner. Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share here. Because our time has expired for today. There was still a ton that I wanted to cover with you guys, but we only have an hour for today. Head on over to the Q&A if you've got any questions. And then, actually, let me put up the screen share one more time because I want to give you guys my my contact information. If you can't get to the Q&A and you still want to answer questions, then you can reach me by email at distinct@distinctfinancialsolutions.com, or you can reach me by phone at 940-297-1474. Those are two main ways you can reach me. If you can't get to the Q&A, or if you'd like to have more discussions about wealth management and financial planning, then feel free to reach out to me by email or by our office telephone number. Again, that email is dmitchell@distinctfinancialsolutions.com, and the phone number at our office is 940-297-1474. We're at our time for today, so you should be provided with the link that will send you over to the Q&A. I'll be over there for about 30 minutes or so. Thanks for talking with me today. Next week, we'll talk about financial freedom and retirement and income planning. We'll tie it all together, but how you should look at your financial plan together, okay? So hope everybody does well. Have a great week. Have an even greater weekend, and I'll see you next week. Take care.